We're live.
Hello.
Hi.
So, welcome to Tech Radar.
We're doing a live show.
We are.
We're going to discuss some things.
I'm Andrew London.
And I'm John Porter.
So, hi there. Today we are talking about Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is a very specific use case of what we're talking about. We are more generally talking about cryptocurrency and about blockchain.
Yes.
So, this is going to be a slightly more of an explainer video than our normal live shows. But if anybody does have any questions as we go along, please shoot them down into the comments. Hello, Fenika. And it looks like there was a bit of chat going on before we started,
the show started,
where someone asked if anyone was there, and then somebody else was bullying them for being alone, which is nice.
I mean, fair enough. Let's start off antagonistically.
Yeah.
Because Lord knows on camera that's going to be exactly the same.
What?
No. Shut up.
Okay, cool. So we've got a few highs, so we'll just do a few of those. So hello to Social Jet Lag, nice. I like your name. Hi from Korea, says Carter Kang, so hi. Hussein Ali, hello. Arif Hassan, hello. Pele, hello. Technologic, hi. So...
Yeah, and I think that the other thing to kind of say is that like blockchain and Bitcoin is this kind of is such a new thing that's come about that I think everyone's kind of struggling to understand it in their own way. So if there are any questions that you have, chuck them in there. But if there's anything that you think you know more than we do and that you could offer a better explanation, then also chuck it in there. I think this is a kind of like learning experience for all of us, and we can all sit around together and work out how much we don't know about our crazy digital money futures. Yeah,
obviously we are tech journalists and not finance specialists, and so there is the possibility that we will say something that isn't 100% accurate, and if that's the case, we want to know, and so pop it into the comments. Cool. So first things for hello.
Whoa, baby.
Okay, so lots of should I invest in Bitcoin? Hey guys, what is a Bitcoin? All of this. So we will be getting onto this. We have had a few people in the past try and use our comment stream to get people to subscribe to their channels. We aren't big fans of that. So if you do that, those comments will be deleted. Understandably. So we are just going to start the ball rolling. What is a blockchain?
What is a blockchain? Okay, right. So, a normal bank, as I understand it, is like a trusted intermediary, right? So, like, you and I, say, like, let's, for the time being, like, pretend we have the same bank, but you probably have your, like, crazy Swiss bank account, and I've got, like, my average Joe, like, UK bank account. But let's pretend, for the sake of argument, we have the same bank. I transfer you some money. So I tell my bank I would like to transfer some money to my pal Andrew London here. Then someone in the bank's ledger can minus £10 from my account and then add £10 to your account, right? And the reason that kind of works is that we trust the bank is regulated, the bank has to like abide by various laws and stuff, and so we kind of, even though the bank essentially, if a bank went wrong, it could ruin most people's lives, we kind of trust that doesn't happen, right?
And obviously you have branches of a bank, but essentially a bank is one centralized entity.
Exactly. They have the same system. They're not all kind of doing things on like pens and paper. Like in modern day, it's all kind of like handled in like a large single kind of server that kind of handles all the information. So what blockchain enables you to do is it's called decentralize that, right? So rather than having like one central intermediary, you have lots of different people doing it. And the genius of the blockchain is that even though there are lots of people doing it who you don't even know the name of, and they could be anywhere in the world, and they could be operating out of China or India or Russia or the US or South America, there's still that same amount of trust that if you transfer money to someone else, that transaction will be recorded clearly, accurately, and that you won't get shortchanged by the whole process, right? So that's essentially what the blockchain is, and then what Bitcoin is a currency built upon that blockchain technology. And the blockchain could do many other things which we currently rely on like a single trusted source to do, but Bitcoin is one of the currency versions of that.
So I think it's probably important now. We're getting a few questions. I just want to let you know that we have seen your questions. And so we've got someone asking what Bitcoin is, which I think John has just answered. We'll go into further detail further on. But someone is saying, is it safe to invest in Bitcoin? Which we will dive into. But I think an important thing is going into how the transactions actually work. Because one of the big things about blockchain and about cryptocurrencies on the whole, so Bitcoin being one of the cryptocurrencies, is this anonymized nature of it. That you were saying about the number of different people all doing the same sums effectively. So it's where, if we took the example that you were saying earlier, that if you wanted to pay me £10, that one server would go, okay, I've removed £10 from there and put it there. With blockchain, what happens is all of the different people that are involved all notate the transaction. So everybody involved goes, okay, so £10 has moved from there to there. And then each of those different transactions all gets noted down by everybody in the thing. And that's kind of how it keeps honest.
Exactly. So everyone is kind of double checking each other's work. And so at the end, you end up with a block being created that through a kind of hashing proof of work process, everyone agrees is what actually happened. And anyone that generates a block that has any differences, it's very easy then to work out that block is not accurate, and it then can be discarded. Because you need a kind of a majority of people to agree on a thing, it would in theory be possible to generate a block that's inaccurate, or to generate like a page in the ledger that's inaccurate. But what would need to happen there is a majority, so like 51% of the network would all have to have exactly the same error in their block, right?
And so if you wanted to, say, for example, make it look like there was more money somewhere than there was, that a majority of the people that were involved in that group would all have to adjust their ledger in the same way so that it looked like that amount of money was in a different place, which would be very difficult to do. And because of the large number of people that are now getting into blockchains, it's less likely to happen.
Exactly. Although, like, still theoretically possible, and I think that's something we'll kind of get into later.
Absolutely. Right? So we've got a bit of a conversation happening in the comments about currency on the whole, about the value of currency. And obviously with pretty much all currencies up until this point, they are leveraged against debt in some way, shape or form. And so obviously there is the perceived notion that a £5 note is worth £5, and that doesn't really mean anything, but it does mean something because it's basically leveraged against the value of what's the best way of explaining it?
I think this is where us not being economists will start to show. I mean, way back in the day, like the whole system was gold backed, right? And so the reason something was a pound was that way back in the day, it was equal to like a pound of gold, right? With like any sort of cryptocurrency, you don't have that. So the baseline value that something has is not a bar of gold. It's not backed by anything physical, but it's basically the raw computing power that caused that Bitcoin to come into existence. After that point, any value that it has is purely based on demand for that thing. So, I mean, the reason like £5 has value is that people want that £5 to be able to buy things that you could buy with £5. So essentially anyone that wants to buy goods and services in the UK is going to create demand for like pounds as a currency, right? So in a situation where the UK wasn't producing anything that the people outside of the UK wanted to buy, the value of the pound would go down because people wouldn't want to buy like the currency of the pound, because they go like, why would I want to like buy pounds when I can buy dollars instead and get the things that are made in America? And so then that kind of value would go up. And so I think probably we can now like get into discussing the idea of like should you invest in Bitcoin?
Yeah, and this is a thing that a few people are asking. So I think I'm saying the same thing that you were getting onto, but I just want to tailor it through.
Sure,
here.
yeah.
So people are saying, how can I invest in Bitcoin? Is Bitcoin legal? Is it too late to invest in Bitcoin? Which are all questions around this same thing. And so yes, Bitcoin is legal. You can invest in it. The question of whether or not you should is an interesting one because the value of Bitcoin fluctuates so massively, and we are currently at an incredibly high point of its value. And so if you think of it like you think of the stock exchange, the general principle is buy when it's cheap and sell when it's expensive. And so we don't know right now whether or not this is a current peak that is going to seem
Yeah.
that is going to be too completely dwarfed by the future, or whether this is the highest it's ever going to be.
Yeah.
And so investing in it at this point is basically whether you have faith in the existence of cryptocurrency going forward and how successful that particular cryptocurrency is going to be in the long run.
So there's the tricky thing about Bitcoin is there's very little like material signs that would indicate to you why the demand for the currency might go up in the future, which in theory would be when you'd want to invest, right? Because you go, demand is going to increase in the future, and then increased demand equals increased price. And so therefore the price will go up and I should invest now and then sell later. The issue with Bitcoin is that because overwhelmingly it's not, like, you can use Bitcoin to buy things. There are a number of shops out there, but those are dwarfed by the total amount of shops that accept traditional currencies. So overwhelmingly, people are not holding Bitcoin because they want to go out and buy groceries and buy things off Amazon and buy like normal goods and services. They're holding onto it because of speculation. And that creates this kind of volatility, because as soon as the price even starts to go down a little bit, everyone who holds Bitcoin will notice that because they're holding onto it for speculative purposes. There's no one there that's like, I don't care about the value of Bitcoin, I just want to buy milk and eggs in the morning. Like people will see that go down, and then people will start to kind of like move their money around to try and like avoid losing money. So because like if tomorrow everyone decided that the UK was done as an economy, like internationally, and everyone sold their pounds, the value of the pound could not hit rock bottom, because fundamentally everyone in the UK will still be using the pound to buy goods and services, and so there'll still be that like that base level of demand there. If tomorrow everyone like lost faith in Bitcoin, it might not hit like complete zero, because you still had that like fundamental store of value that the kind of the computing power that was needed to create in the first place like gave it. But there'd be no like community of people that only use Bitcoin that would have to hold on to their Bitcoin stores in order to like buy milk and eggs and buy like the fundamentals of life and stuff. And so the potential for it to crash is much, much higher. And that's part of the reason why it's such a volatile currency.
Yeah, and one of the things that people are talking about a bit in the comments that is definitely worth bringing into this conversation is the transactions that do happen because of cryptocurrencies.
Yes.
And there was a conversation about why would it be illegal, and someone was saying because people buy guns and drugs and things, and because it is an anonymized currency, it is possible to do things that you wouldn't be able to do with a normal currency, because you can get away with them technically. And this is kind of a fallacy, isn't it? That I think it's very easy, because all of the transactions are anonymized, to think that there is no way of tracking them. And so there are concerns about money laundering, and there are concerns about the drug trade and human trafficking and slavery and all of these things, which people have been using cryptocurrency for. So it's not that these things don't exist or that they aren't a thing. And some of the biggest fluctuations that we've seen in the price of cryptocurrencies is when a major black market drug site gets taken down, and suddenly the value of it plummets. And so this is definitely a thing that the currencies are being used for, which means that there are some people that avoid cryptocurrencies because of that, because of the ethical implications. But it's not quite as clear cut that the transactions are anonymized, so everything you do is anonymous, is it?
No, so that's an interesting. I mean, like before we dive into the illegal things you can do with it, there are like a number of stores that take Bitcoin for completely legal reasons. I believe like up until recently, Steam, the online games marketplace, would allow you to pay in Bitcoin. The first thing I heard of Bitcoin was years and years and years ago, when it was being used in a coffee shop, and it was this thing that people were just going, the drive behind creating cryptocurrency wasn't necessarily let's do stuff and not get caught. It was an improved way of doing banking. Exactly. And then unfortunately the kind of the volatility of Bitcoin has now meant that like Steam, for example, has stopped accepting Bitcoin payments. just because like people would put a bunch of games in their account, would get to the checkout, and Steam would go, okay, calculation, oh, that will equal 0.0001 Bitcoin. And then by the time they've gone through the checkout process, the price of Bitcoin has changed so much that Steam wasn't getting the correct amount. And so this volatility that we're experiencing at the moment is actually making it increasingly difficult to use it for the purposes, these kind of like legal purposes. Accepting it like as legal tender does kind of have its own like weird issues though, because most countries in the world see Bitcoin not as a currency but as an asset. So in the same way that you might buy stocks and shares of a company, or like bars of gold or whatever, you can buy Bitcoin. But then in terms of like trading those, if you're a shop, you kind of have, as I understand it, more legal obligations when you're accepting an asset rather than a currency. So if you come in, if I'm a shop owner, you come in with a £5 note, I don't have to like look into your. Doesn't matter if that £5 note is stolen. It doesn't matter if you like rob someone. I mean, if I saw you robbing someone, then that's probably different. But like, I don't have any like legal obligation. If you come in to like a pawn shop with a TV and you're like, I want to sell this TV, and that TV looks stolen, at that point I have a certain legal obligation to like maybe not accept this TV that looks like it's been stolen off the back of a truck. And Bitcoin falls into that latter class of things, right? So. If someone suspects that it has been stolen or it has been laundered and stuff, then they can't just claim ignorance and go like, oh, it's currency, because it's not, it's an asset. But now we can probably return to the illegal to the anonymous illegal dealings of Bitcoin.
So this is an interesting thing that people think that because the transactions are all anonymized, this thing that we were talking about earlier, that everybody is monitoring all of the transactions.
The distributed ledger.
The distributed ledger, that when those ledgers are being formed, it doesn't say John is transferring Andrew, it says wallet number, blah, 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 is transferring to wallet, blah, 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 blah. And so it's anonymized. And so that doesn't mean that you can't track the money that has changed hands and where it's gone. And so what is happening now is that you buy a cryptocurrency you basically have a digital wallet. And in order to set up that wallet, you have to put some of your actual, whatever your currency is, into that wallet and transfer it using an exchange into whichever cryptocurrency you want to use. And then you spend the cryptocurrency. And then if you want to turn whatever you have in your wallet back into your currency, you can then do that using an exchange. But it's becoming much more difficult, and there are regulations being put into place that in order to set up this wallet, you have to give certain information about yourself, and so that isn't anonymized. And so then you can track the transaction history of that wallet through the blockchain to wherever you've spent the money and whatever you've got in return. And so it's there's actually a movement that's saying that this could prevent money laundering rather than cause it. And it is entirely possible if you have the wallet ID to find where the money is going. And so it's not as anonymized as people think it is.
There's I mean, with traditional money laundering, there's like a reason why the people typically talk about like Swiss bank accounts and that sort of thing, because you can hold your money in offshore accounts, and then because it's not a public ledger, it's not a distributed ledger, it's a ledger that's held within a certain organization. If you can't get access to that organization's records, and you have no idea what's going on with the money inside that organization. With Bitcoin, if you want to track the movement of money, you can just look at this public ledger, and if someone wants to turn that into real world money, then at some point they'll have to use a cryptocurrency exchange like Coinbase, and Coinbase does do identification checks. So if a law enforcement agency wants to subpoena a place like Coinbase, they can essentially like find out people's identities. So I mean, the classic example of the limits of the anonymity is Satoshi, the one of the original founders of Bitcoin, and he has like a Bitcoin wallet that everyone can look at because it's on blockchain.info, and so you can see exactly how much money is in this wallet. And at this point, I think it's millions, if not billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, but it's never been moved out of that wallet. And so the moment he were to like move that to Coinbase and then like extract it, at that point people would be able to find out who he is. And it's only the fact that he hasn't moved it that's kind of kept his identity secret. So yes, it's anonymous. There are limits to that anonymity, because this ledger is so public, and the degree to which you think that's a good thing or a bad thing will probably, well, I mean, I think there are degrees to which you can think that's a good thing or a bad thing, basically. Do you want to take some questions?
Yeah, and so we've had lots of interesting chat. There was one just up here that I definitely wanted to jump on. Carter Kang is asking a question that I don't know the answer to. I don't know if you'll know the answer to. He's saying, how come cryptocurrency value is different in every country? It's higher in Korea. Is that because there's more demand there? So I don't know whether an individual cryptocurrency would have a different value in terms of, like, if you related it to a solid state currency. Yeah. That's a question I don't know the answer
to.
I
mean, it will definitely have different values in terms of, the amount of pound coins that you can, like, how much one Bitcoin is worth in pounds versus how much one Bitcoin is worth in dollars, and that sort of thing. And that kind of comes down to the different values of the different currencies, which will all vary against one another, unless they're pegged, which is like a whole other kettle of fish.
But that should be relative to the individual currencies rather than it actually being that one Bitcoin is worth more. Like, if it was that one Bitcoin was worth less in one country than another country, you'd be able to change it for that currency and then sell that currency as a different currency and make money out of it.
And that ability to do that seamlessly is what provides what's called liquidity to a market, which means that enough people will be making that transaction that it will basically balance out. Because if you can make a profit doing something, then enough people will do it that the profit incentive will disappear. Although it does raise an interesting question about, like, whether there are enough people that want to buy Bitcoin. So one of the things that's brought up as a kind of warning against investing in stuff is that if the price of Bitcoin crashes, there is no guarantee that you'd actually be able to sell your Bitcoin at all, because if there is no one out there that wants to buy your Bitcoin from you, then you can't sell it. And I think you take it for granted with normal currencies, there will always be someone who's willing to buy pounds or dollars or what have you, because just the market is so massive. But when it comes to Bitcoin, it's that much smaller, and so there's not that, like, iron guarantee that there will always be a buyer for your currency at any price.
Yeah. Talking of impending problems of cryptocurrency, Eduardo Mendez has said Bitcoin is surging towards a serious mining problem, and no one knows what will happen when it gets there. And so mining is basically the technical term for what we were talking about, the people involved in registering the ledger.
Yeah.
Like that process is mining.
Yes.
And so part of mining is that you get paid in whatever the cryptocurrency is for using your computer to calculate the transactions.
Yes.
And so there is a value attributed to you being the remote server.
But because, like, as much as people joke about Bitcoin being created out of nothing, it's ultimately being created by computers that are drawing electricity and that have value, and so Bitcoin kind of like piggybacks off that computing workload. The mining issue is a really interesting one, and I know that it was either last year or like over the course of a couple of months, the Bitcoin mining network used more electricity than the entirety of Ireland. And this basically comes from the fact that not only do you have all of these different computers basically double checking each other's work to make sure that no one is cheating the system, but the way they're ensuring that no one can fake it is they're doing these incredibly difficult maths problems, essentially, that they're generating proof of work, and those are incredibly like energy inefficient because they kind of have to be by design.
Yeah.
And so it means that you have this network that's just drawing like huge amounts of power from the grid. And so people are quite rightly kind of going, this is kind of like, we're in a time of supposedly trying to reduce our like carbon footprint. And yet we have this cryptocurrency thing that's like, that's massively increasing it in its own way. The response to that is always, well, what's the carbon footprint of your average bank? And I think that argument carries a lot of weight. The thing I would say to that is that if your bank is running lights and is consuming water for the bathrooms and like those general like energy costs, that's a kind of a byproduct of the system, and so those can get more like energy efficient over time. You can buy like more energy efficient light bulbs. You can put in insulation in your walls and stuff, and so because it's a byproduct. Whereas cryptocurrencies, it's baked into the core way that the blockchain works, and so it is definitely a problem that needs to be solved. And there are a couple of really interesting solutions that people are proposing. I know that in China at least, there's lots of work being done with renewable energy sources. So people are kind of hooking up Bitcoin processing servers, blockchain nodes to like solar panels and to hydroelectric dams and that sort of thing, which I think is really, really good. There have been a couple of initiatives too, because these servers chuck out so much heat, is to sell people these things sold as heaters, which actually have like a Bitcoin mining rig in them that generates enough heat that it heats your house, and so that heat isn't going to waste and just being like expelled out of the side of a server.
Yeah.
Which is quite cool, right?
Which is quite cool. And there have been some sneaky people. Like there was a guy who put a mining rig into his Tesla.
Yes.
So that, because if you are, like, it's not all Tesla models, but there are some Tesla models where once you've bought the car, you have free use of the superchargers. And so you basically get free energy because you bought a Tesla.
Yeah.
And so he was just like, okay, cool. I don't have to spend the electricity costs because I can just get my Tesla to do it. And so, yeah, obviously that was probably frowned upon, but that was the way that he managed to do it.
A final point on the mining crisis.
Yeah.
There's a hard limit on the amount of transactions Bitcoin, the blockchain, Bitcoin's blockchain can process in every minute. And although it seemed like enough at the time when it was created, it has quickly become clear that it is not at all. And so that if this is to become like a more wide-ranging currency that you can use without a transaction having to go to like a queue to be processed, there are kind of discussions as to like how the quantity of transactions that are processed per minute can be increased. And then I think there have been kind of internal schisms and stuff, and because Bitcoin is open source, people kind of made their own they made their own forks of the software, and that's where we get Bitcoin Cash from. And it's so, I mean, it's fascinating. Yeah. It's very complicated.
Yeah. I'm just going to do some rapid fire question answering. Prakar Patel has asked why GPU rather than CPU, and so it's the graphics processing unit, and so that's basically to do with how the drivers work. The energy needed to do mining can only be handled by a GPU.
It can be handled by a CPU, but a GPU is much more in it. It's just the way it's kind of structured means that it's better at doing it more energy efficiently. I don't know the exact architecture reasons for that.
Yeah, we have got a guide for best GPUs for mining
exactly
on Tech Radar. So if you want to check that out, you can.
Lots of gamers are very unhappy with this because it has been driving up the price of GPUs, particularly AMD ones, which is a shame.
Yeah. Do I require coding knowledge to mine? No.
But I would say don't go into mining with no knowledge at all. Please do read up.
yeah, absolutely. And so Pele's asking, if only people in USA could use Bitcoin and no other country had Bitcoin, would the currency rise still happen? Or if more people bought it? And so that's not really, like, I understand that you're probably asking that question hypothetically, but the nature of these things is that they are global and...
this is the big benefit of Bitcoin, that I can pay money to someone in Argentina.
That it isn't like a standard global currency that... I don't mean global currency, I mean individual national currency, that it is globalized, and so that isn't really a question that you can answer.
But I think in answer to that question, if only people in the US had access to Bitcoin, the price would still go up and down because there would still be varying levels of supply and demand. If everyone in the US had to use Bitcoin and the USA was the only country in the world, then, well, there wouldn't be any other currencies.
So, it looks like this question's already been answered in the comments, but someone is just asking, if you lose your wallet, or if you lose access to it, or you forget your password, or someone steals it, or whatever, can you get your money back? No.
Oh, there was a story about a guy that managed to do exactly that. So
really?
It's all like, now we're reaching the limits of my knowledge of Bitcoin, but basically, so you have the public key, which identifies your wallet on the network, and then you have your private key, which only you know. And if you lose that private key, then I think, yes, you do lose access to your wallet. But I think there are potentially ways of recovering that. But then obviously that you don't want anyone else to be able to discover your private key, so it's made artificially difficult to be able to guess that. The typical thing that like that a Bitcoin wallet will do is kind of give you a long passphrase which you have to commit to memory, or well, in effect probably write down somewhere, because let's be honest. So and then that is then used as your kind of the private version of the public key.
Yeah.
This is the part I'm not sure on. But there have been like, you know, instances of people like losing like hundreds of Bitcoins that they've stored offline and stuff. But then I think there are other services where you kind of store them in a more online way and it's more safe.
Yeah, we've got somebody who's asking. They've said 80% of Bitcoin is mined. What's next? Please answer.
yeah, this is the other interesting thing, that like ultimately, so that there's only ever going to be, there's a hard cap on the amount of Bitcoin that will ever be produced. So every single block that's created generates a certain amount of Bitcoin. After a certain number of blocks, that amount of Bitcoin goes down until eventually it hits zero. At that point, because there'll be no, essentially, as I understand it, there'll be no incentive to mine. There will be no miners, because no one will want to spend money on electricity to get no reward, right? But I think the answer to that is that Bitcoin is open source, Bitcoin can change, and so in the same way that, you know, the British government can announce a program of like quantitative easing and can kind of essentially change the open source protocol behind like British pounds, the developers behind Bitcoin can change the source code in the same way. That will affect the value, because that will affect people's idea of like the stability of it, people's idea of the usefulness of it. That will affect the value, but that is, you would hope, something that will be addressed at some point, because that hard cap will be hit at some point.
Yeah. And so that is dealing with Bitcoin specifically, but I wonder whether or not that there was also a question of what's the next Bitcoin.
So like, but this is the best analogy I've heard for Bitcoin is that Bitcoin is to blockchain what like Friendster or MySpace was to social media, right? That like Bitcoin is the first kind of imperfect use case for this thing. It's got loads of problems, it's got a really bad reputation, and you're kind of waiting for that like companies to come out there and go like, no, here is our version of this technology. The analogy kind of breaks down when you kind of consider the fact that Facebook, yes, it's a platform, but it's a platform owned by one company, owned and operated by one company. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are kind of not that, and by their very nature are decentralized, and so it can't be one company going like, here's the thing, we're going to control it, because it needs to be distributed amongst nodes, otherwise like it's not a blockchain use case at all. So I don't know. I think Ethereum, which is like a competing blockchain, is really interesting, because it's all kind of set up for people to set up their own cryptocurrencies on it. Someone set up a Crypto-kitties system, whereby instead of like currency, you're like buying and trading like essentially virtual Beanie Babies or like virtual kittens. So you can basically build your own thing and put it on the Ethereum blockchain. That seems super interesting. That seems ripe for someone to come in and do something interesting. I know there are loads of different cryptocurrencies like Litecoin, which I believe came out of Dogecoin back in the day, and it's all, and there's Kanye coin way back when.
There are a lot. This is a thing that obviously we are at the start of a new wave of something, and so we're currently in the phase of everyone's doing a blockchain for something, and so we are receiving at least 2 or 3 emails a day that are from people we've never heard from before, being like, we've created the blockchain for
dating apps,
for dating, we've created the blockchain for eyebrows, we've created the blockchain for what smells are.
I mean, it's the cloud, right? It's the like, everything's, what's the cloud? I don't know, we've got it though, because investors, right?
Yeah, and so there are probably going to be a lot of really interesting and useful applications of blockchain that aren't to do with currency as directly as Bitcoin or any of these, and so we're early days.
I think so. I think there's a lot of over-promising going on. I think it's gotten annoyingly factional, where there are like certain people that are like, oh, like Bitcoin, it's some crazy future money that'll never catch on, and then some people going like, no, like Bitcoin is like, you need to take Bitcoin seriously, it will do like everything. I don't think either is true. I think like it's like everything, it'll be somewhere in the middle. People are saying some really interesting things about stuff you could put into the blockchain and then kind of automate in that way. But as far as I know, essentially like that sort of thing kind of breaks down as soon as there's a real world element. So if you had like a blockchain for buying houses, right, you can no, like maybe that's not a good example. Maybe if you had a blockchain for like a manufacturing like supply chain process, right, then you could kind of go, oh cool, I can like track where this box came from because I can see in the public ledger exactly its route. But like, because there's a real world element, someone could cheat that and then could basically say like, no, but then this thing has come from over here, and like I'm going to report it's coming from over here. Whereas with currency, like the only record you have is online. Like it doesn't, the physical implications of it only matter when you need to transfer it out. So like I have X amount in my bank account, you have X amount in your bank account, Y amount in your bank account, because let's be clear, we're two different people.
Yeah.
And like there's no real world implication of that until you go to a bank and like withdraw it, and the bank just looks at the ledger. Whereas like if you've got some sort of like supply chain thing, then that real world element means that you could just report it differently at the point of entry into the blockchain.
Yeah.
I believe. So don't believe everything you read about blockchain. I think it is important. It's not going to be everything.
Yeah. So we've kind of got to the end of the amount of time we normally do one of these videos for, and I feel like we've kind of got to the end of the things that we were going to talk about. There has been a lot of discussion in the comments, and thank you very much for that. It's brilliant. I feel like we've either touched on the points, or people have had the conversations themselves. And so, someone has just said the technology in blockchain is bigger than Bitcoin itself. And yes,
completely agree.
Absolutely, completely agree. And so, like we have been saying, I think it's just going to be interesting seeing what this technology eventually becomes. That we are in the early stages of it, and so
it's. I think the waters are being muddied by a lot of people making some very grand promises. And I think because a lot of these companies are publicly traded and they're being invested in by people who are not technophiles, I think that's kind of over-egging exactly what this stuff is capable of. We haven't really touched upon independent coin offerings, which is kind of a way of like raising finances for companies that everyone seems to be jumping on. But it's like, as far as I can tell, it's kind of just a way of like skirting the normal regulations about initial public offerings, IPOs. Like Kodak, the film company, recently like made like a horrific amount of money by doing an ICO, an independent coin offering. And I think like the water's being muddied by these very grand promises that are kind of confusing the conversation as to what's actually possible and to what this actually means. Especially when you have companies that are trying to take control, like as I said before, companies that are trying to claim ownership of a thing that's decentralized. I think Bitcoin, the lovely thing about blockchain and Bitcoin is that it's grassroots. It's a community. It's community insofar as the open source community is a community. It's kind of coming up from the bottom. It's not being imposed from the top. And so I think anyone that is from the top saying that they've got a blockchain thing, you need to be immediately skeptical of.
So we have got Hubert Kowalski has asked a few times now about Ripple and Ripple blockchain, and so it's another cryptocurrency, and so its blockchain will work the same as the way we have explained how blockchain works. And so fundamentally, blockchain works one way. It is the working system of a decentralized ledger, and then whatever blockchain is being used for is.
Yes. No, but then each of them have their own little secret sauce that they kind of add to it. Like I know there are some that kind of focused on increasing the privacy aspects and some that are focused on like allowing more transactions per minute. I have to say, when it comes to Ripple, I don't know exactly what Ripple's secret sauce is. So I don't know how exactly Ripple differs to the competition personally.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah. Apologies, Hubert. Sorry.
Cool. And so that is us. We have got to the end of our video. So thank you very much, everybody, for watching and for popping your comments down there. If you decide later that you have more things that you would like to know about, please do come back and pop them in the comments. We will be reading them.
Absolutely. I mean, there are a couple of pages on the site that you should probably check out if you're interested in Bitcoin blockchain. We have a guide to the best wallets. We have a guide to the best I think we have a guide to just the best cryptocurrencies generally. I think we have a guide to the best mining GPUs if you want to get into mining. And a guide to the best exchanges.
Yeah, if we've spoken too quickly, we do also have an explainer where you can just read it through in your own time and be like, now it makes sense.
Yeah, fantastic. Those two well-spoken posh Englishmen, as it turns out, didn't have all of the details I needed.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks so much for joining us. See ya.
Bye.